Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, with the transfer portal largely winding down, and we're not just covering commitments pretty much all day, we get a little bit more time to dive into some of these transfer portal additions. And for the South Carolina fans who've been rocking with the fellas the last couple of weeks, you already know this. Former Alabama linebacker Justin Okoronkwo. And South Carolina did a lot of intriguing stuff in the transfer portal. I don't know if I'm more excited for a transfer portal addition than this kid coming to South Carolina, largely for two reasons. Number one, he's got an opportunity to get on the football field early for South Carolina in 2025, right? South Carolina replacing a lot of production at that off-ball linebacker spot certainly was a position they wanted to address in the transfer portal. They elect to address it with a linebacker, Justin Okoronkwo, that I don't know if there's a linebacker across the country that has the upside that this kid brings to the table. And we talked about him when he committed. You talk about the physical specimen one. Take one look at him. You want him getting off the bus first. He certainly looks like a linebacker that you would build in a laboratory. Then you start looking at the athletic profile, some of the testing numbers, 4.5 in the 40-yard dash, 10.2 in the broad jump, extremely explosive athlete, which we talk about a lot in this modern era of college football. Dill, we need our linebackers to be good in space. We need our linebackers to be athletic. I think all South Carolina fans remember what Stone Blanton looked like a couple of years ago, where it's just when you're athletically limited at linebacker, teams will attack you in space. Teams will try to get you to the perimeter. And when you don't have that athleticism, it's really easy to attack in a defense. You look at Justin Okoronkwo, there's no physical limitations that this kid brings to the table. Now, we spent the last, 24 hours kind of diving into Justin Okoronkwo, kind of a combination of some of the mop-up duty we saw from him at Alabama in 2024. But go back to that spring game, Dill. Two things jumped out. One, 11 tackles in that spring game. More importantly, it was very clear Alabama liked this kid a lot. Like, they were giving him in 2024, whenever it was mop-up duty, hey, we're trying to get this kid on the football field and get him developed. And then the spring game pretty much didn't come off the football field. Like, it was very clear they wanted to get this kid involved early on for Alabama. I'm really excited to get into some of the film that we saw, talk about where he fits in the South Carolina defense. Before we get into it, as always, to the South Carolina fans, it ain't many programs that I've had more fun talking about and covering the commitments, talking about what this team can look like in 2024. The amount of support y'all have shown the boys means the absolute world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Yo, we got a couple names on that list that we want to do some deep dives into over the next couple of weeks. Let's start with Justin Okoronkwo. Let's start generally. Before we get into some of the film that we have pulled up, you watch this kid in the spring game. You watch this kid in 2024. What are you most excited about with him coming to South Carolina here?
Probably the big thing you look at first is the physicality, because you can know by the track times and the broad jumps and all those kind of athletic metrics that you can test, like in the underwear Olympics, if you will. Yeah, if they're good athletes, but sometimes you see especially guys who didn't play football early in their career and kind of develop in different sports. Like, you see them get in, okay, they can run fast, they can do certain things. But if an offensive lineman gets their hands on him, is he going to have the physicality? Does he have that kind of want to put his face mask into their face mask and kind of take a block on hard? I think that is the one thing that kind of jumps out. And there's certainly some technical things that need to be cleaned up for sure in terms of how he's doing it. But I don't think you see any lack of will to go run into guys and be physical and be aggressive.
When he wants to fire downhill and meet you at the point of attack, you better be ready to pay a price, because the physicality that he is devastating in terms of when he's firing downhill. Now, you are right. There are times when you watch Justin where, one, it looks like he's processing a little bit slow, which is to be expected. This is a kid that hasn't played a ton of football, but when he is trusting his eyes and trusting his instincts and getting downhill, he can really do some damage. I think the best example of this, Dill, and there's two things I love about this play. This is early on, and again, what you want to stress here is he's literally been playing football for 3 years. And some of the stuff you see from him is, he's playing SEC football right now, and it looks like he's been playing football his whole life at times. This rep right here, play side linebacker, wearing that sleeve right here, number 41. Number one, let's keep ourselves clean at the second level, right? Wisconsin going with a little outside zone, trying to get their offensive linemen to the linebackers at the second level. His athleticism, it's extremely hard for offensive linemen to reach him at the second level because he's so fast. And we're going to quick little shoulder lean. Offensive line pretty much just whiffs on him. And then Dill, you said it best. Like when we're bringing the pads, fitting this running back, the 18-year-old kid just fitting the running back at the line of scrimmage, bringing the pads to the party. And like there's two things that you really like here. One, let's look at the instincts. Let's look at keeping ourselves clean and then go find the ball carrier. Not only find the ball carrier, let's go stand that ball carrier up. That's what stands out to me the most. You see these flashes of just such a special linebacker going into 2025.
And again, you kind of said it, like that ability to tackle the right way. I mean, that's really keeping your head up, like just fitting them up and getting them back. Like, and it is frustrating watching linebackers who don't do that. When you give up 4 or 5 extra yards because you're doing an arm tackle and you're getting dragged, like that ability to physically tackle it, it certainly matters a lot, especially when you're trying to be South Carolina and you're not playing bend, don't break. Like you want to be a dominant defense and really shut teams down. Like you need linebackers who can get behind the line and make negative plays, not just make tackles. Like you have 10, 11 tackles and they're all coming 8 yards downfield. You're getting dragged, like those type of things. Like,
yeah, I do. I really agree with that. And that's one of the things that frustrates me the most when we're talking about linebackers. It's really easy to say, oh yeah, this is a good linebacker because he had 95 tackles. And then you look at the average up to tackle and it's like 5.5 yards down the field. It's one thing to just fill the stat sheet up with tackles that aren't that impactful. And it's a whole nother thing to be attacking the line of scrimmage, making your plays at or behind the line of scrimmage. That's what Justin Okoronkwo does when you see the flashes. And here's another really good example. We're playing, again, off-ball linebacker here, big number 41. When he trusts his eyes, there's two things. One, he is so fast in terms of closing the speed. I mean, look, we want to get this double team right here and work up to Justin. He's so fast when he wants to get downhill. You don't stand a chance if you're a guard trying to pick him up. And then what he does, I'm going to get behind the line of scrimmage. I'm going to deal with some of that contact and traffic and then go make a really big play.
And that is kind of the difference is like you actually need to fit him up and block him because like there's athletic, rangy linebackers who don't attack physically downhill. Like, yeah, they can move and they can get into their gaps, but like if linemen get a hand on them, they can kind of hold them up or slow them down a little bit. When you're that size and you play that physically, like it's really hard because linebacker or offensive lineman, I should say, really need to be on point because you can't kind of glance block him. Like you really need to be able to fit him up because again, he does play with the physical nature that a lot of athletic linebackers.
So the last play we'll dive into real quick. Well, one more, just I want to show what he can do in space. And again, this to me is becoming such an important. Look at what Ohio State did to Oregon in that Rose Bowl, where it said, "Hey, we don't think your guys can run with our guys in space. We're going to try to get to the perimeter, and we're going to attack your athleticism." When you pull up this play from the spring game, this is not like the flashiest play. One, you like him dropping back in his zone coverage right here. But number two, I mean, you talk about commanding the middle of the field in zone coverage, being able to close space immediately. A lot of these type of things go for 20 yards because linebackers can't cover ground. I mean, Justin Okoronkwo, he is immediately covering ground and making plays in space. That just kind of highlights the athleticism. Now, getting into one thing you want to see him work on, and again, there's a lot of this because he is new to the sport of football. When we're taking on blocks, we got to come with our hands, and sometimes he just comes like a heat-seeking missile. And look, I'd rather teach my linebackers, hey, let's technically refine it instead of having them playing scared. But you take a look at it right here. But you love him attacking downhill right here. You certainly love it. But we got to come with our hands to the party here. And we got to be able to get off this block. And sometimes he gets a little over his skis, doesn't keep his eyes where he needs to be, and you kind of get beat here. But you can tell, I mean, there is no passiveness when it comes to taking on blocks. We just got to use our hands so we can get off these blocks and make the tackle as well.
Especially because you don't see him getting like necessarily physically overpowered. It's just like he runs into him and he doesn't shed it. It's like you do see the knockback, like the aggressiveness. But
yeah.
Again, there is that, and that is something like I feel like you see a lot of linebackers not necessarily play with, like that ability to use their hands and shed blocks. Hey, you see defensive linemen do it, but I do feel like that's a thing that not a lot of linebackers do consistently enough. That is probably the next piece in his game, and if you really see a dominant player just playing really clean at the technical.
The technical, it's two things that you think he needs to clean up. One, some of the technical stuff like we just saw. And then number two, there are times where we just get a little bit lost. And again, we haven't played that much football yet, so that's to be expected. To me, I look at this kid and say he's ahead of schedule. I remember covering his commitment when he committed to Alabama a year and a half ago. And we said, hey, this kid has the chance to be really, really special. I think it'll take probably 2 years, maybe 3. We're ahead of schedule because it very well could be in 2025. And that's kind of an important conversation because you look at this depth chart and say we're thin at linebacker, right? In Fred Johnson, Justin Okoronkwo, 2 cats that are going into year 2 of their college football careers, very well could be great linebackers for South Carolina, but there's probably not a proven commodity in this room. And so if I'm Shane Beamer, I'm going in and saying, hey, we got a lot of potential for guys to step up and emerge. But if they don't and they maybe need another year, you can go into the spring transfer portal window and say, hey, we don't need to necessarily get a free show at linebacker, but let's go get a solid one that's made a lot of tackles and that's played a lot of football. If Justin O steps up for South Carolina in the 2025 season, that melts away a lot of the concerns that I have for this defense going into the 2025 year. It's really only off-ball linebacker in that middle of the defensive line. And and Xavion Hardy apparently is up to 295, which I think is great news for South Carolina fans. We'll see how it shakes out. Probably the most important name if you're a South Carolina fan, him and Gabriel Brown-Ladindi, in terms of what do these guys look like in spring practice? 2 guys with a ton of upside. We might do a breakdown on Brown-Ladindi too, because there are some things that you see that you like with him too. Just hasn't been consistent enough, I'd say. All right, we'll get out of here on that. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.